Hello, I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. Today we're speaking with a protester in Belgrade, Serbia by the name of Raleigh. Hello, Raleigh. Welcome to UATV.
Zdravo. Hello.
All right, so you're in Belgrade, Serbia. They just finished a very contentious election, and I know there's a lot of people protesting, especially young people, all over Novi Sad and Belgrade, all over the country. Can you explain, what are they protesting, and what just happened in Belgrade, in Serbia?
Well, the current Prime Minister, Aleksander Vucic, he was re-elected last Sunday. This went against a lot of people's wishes, and immediately the following day, Monday, students organized a spontaneous protest. That started with a few hundred, but already as of yesterday, the third day of protesting, it's gone up to, last estimates, around 8,000 people. And it's continuing. It's continuing today, in fact, in another half an hour, and they should have them going on throughout the week.
And it was the Prime Minister, Aleksander Vucic, correct? He was elected president, yes?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, he was Prime Minister, now he's going to become president, but won't he relinquish his Prime Minister role?
As far as I understand, yes.
And isn't the presidential post more ceremonial?
Should be, but there's a lot of speculation that he's going to consolidate more power with this.
So there's a feeling that he's going to become an authoritarian, almost dictator-like, yes?
Yes, that's generally what the feeling is right now.
But what are they? Is there also a lot of protesting going on as far as the media, the state-run media, and some of the election committees in Serbia? A lot of the people there feel that the other candidates were not given as much airtime as Vucic?
Certainly, they were not given very much airtime. You can find a few illustrations. 6, 7 major media outlets, their newspapers, magazines, all they did was publish information about Vucic and barely gave any other information through newspaper, television, traditional media outlets. They barely gave any information to the other candidates like Jankovic, Jeremic, and this parody guy, Belly, for example. Most of those guys, the only way they were actually able to get out their message was through a few billboards and, of course, online.
Vucic...
most of it was focused...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Most of it has been focused on Vucic. And, in fact, many people, they would have problems like they might have to go to jail, or they had a court case pending, and in order to get out of the court case, they were told by people from Vucic's regime, if you can find 5 people who will vote for Vucic, then we will make your court case finish.
Is Vucic, I know that a lot of young people, are students, have taken to the streets, they're dissatisfied with him, but is he popular with some of the older Serbs?
Well, that's generally what's happening is out in the rural areas where the only media access they have is television, newspaper. All they are getting is a constant bombardment on the news of Vucic, so they really aren't even aware of other candidates.
What is the situation like? I know you're in Belgrade, you're in central Belgrade. What is it like there? Tell me about these protests. What is happening? How many people? What's it like there in central Belgrade?
Well, in Belgrade, as I said, Monday, it was just a spontaneous gathering, mainly students, a few hundred. Everyone had just printed out signs very quickly. People had organized in front of the Parliament building, and it started very spontaneously. But here it has been 3 days, and as far as what I've seen, it's now getting into the few thousands, 8,000, 9,000 as of last night when they had the last protest. So it's growing quite quickly. You're seeing a lot of it already, even in Canada, Western Europe, it's already getting publicity. But here specifically in Serbia, there's barely anything being spoken about it. Or if any of the news media outlets are explaining it in Serbia, they're only calling it a small gathering of elite students.
Is there a lot of police activity on the streets?
Not specifically. However, though, just like in some of the previous protests, Ne davimo Belgrade, there are police undercover.
Tell me about the other candidates. Oh, there are a lot of undercover policemen. Okay. Tell me about
the protests.
I see. Tell me about the other candidates. You know, among some of the students at the protests, who did they favor?
Well, a lot of the students and young folk, they did prefer Bailey. I mean, he meant intentionally to be a parody candidate. He would go on, I lie to my people, and they like it. This was all meant to be a joke. He would dress up in furs, wear his hipster man bun, ride around on a horse, making fun of a lot of, I suppose, Serbian tradition. But he was meant to be a joke, and he knew that. He's only about 25 years old, as I know. But he actually got second in the votes. There were two other candidates, principally Jeremic and Jankovic. Jeremic, as I understand, was in the UN Council. He was actually running it, United Nations. Jankovic was an ombudsman through Serbia. So Belgrade was a parody candidate, and Jeremic and Jankovic both were experienced politicians and much more Western leaning.
So Vucic, what is his background? I know he has a long background in Serbia, but where does he come from? What's his background, especially when it relates to the 90s?
Well, that's the great irony, is he was actually working under Slobodan Milosevic in the 90s. And his stance back in the 90s, he was quite nationalist. I'm not specifically sure what his role is, but he was working specifically with Milosevic in the 90s. And then after that all went wild. He started changing his outward appearance to be pro-European, pro-Western, and looking for entry into the European Union. Now, he's saying that publicly, but most people think that he's not very sincere with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of reports in the media that he wants to join the EU, but he still wants to keep a good balanced relationship with Russia. And are you saying that a lot of people believe, especially younger people believe, that that's just not true? He doesn't want to go the way of Europe?
A lot of young people certainly believe that, yes. I mean, I've talked with people here who could say specifically, for example, a friend of mine, she works as a university professor in Sigidunum, and she's specifically being called and told not to discuss anything about Vucic on Facebook, not to discuss it with their students, and that, well, the owner of Sigidunum University actually has worked with Vucic. He was in jail, in fact, but Vucic somehow got him out of jail, and now they were actually collecting money through pensioneres, retired people's pension checks, and that money was being back to him in order to get him out of jail. The ironic part is these pensioners, these old people, they will vote for him, even though they're getting their money taken away.
So a friend who works at the state-run university is being told not to discuss this with her students.
Well, actually, it's a private university, but the owner of the private university was actually a criminal at one point there in Serbia.
So what do the students, or the protesters, I should say, what do they want? What do they want immediately, short-term and long-term?
Immediately, they, protiv diktatura, they want to stop this, as they call it, dictatorship, the continuing dictatorship. They feel that if he, now that he's been reelected and continues in his role, he will continue to get more and more autocratic. And there could potentially be a return to the 90s, which no one in Serbia, no one that I know personally, wants that.
So immediately, what would need to happen, let's just say, for these protesters to disband in the short term? What would they need to hear from Vucic or the government?
They need to hear something from Vucic, but Vucic hasn't said anything. So I guess they must continue to protest. The numbers keep growing, and they are already starting to get, I suppose they need some sort of political backing. As it is, it's mainly just students, and they don't have any organizations supporting them, which if they can't get someone through independently through the government, then it will be difficult for them to get a change.
How nervous, well, our neighboring countries such as Bosnia, Montenegro, are these countries, do you think the people there nervous when they see Vucic become elected president? Do you think this makes them anxious?
I believe so. I haven't heard or seen those opinions from them. I can tell you, at least for now, the protests are peaceful, and Vucic hasn't done anything directly concerning these protests.
Okay. Well, anything else that you foresee happening in the next few weeks or next week with regard to the protests or anything with the government? Do you anticipate anything happening? What is your synopsis of what's going to happen?
Well, the protests keep growing. There's one happening in a half an hour right now, one already set for tomorrow, the following Saturday, and they've been growing in numbers. So I suppose at some point, if they keep getting larger and larger and garnering support, and this is not only in Belgrade, this is in Novi Sad, Kragujevac, Niš, Novi Pazar, and all of the major cities in Serbia, there are protests going on. I suppose if these protests continue to grow and increase support, eventually Vucic and the Serbian government will have to react. I certainly hope it's in a nonviolent way.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Raleigh. We really appreciate it, and we'll keep informed on what's going on in Belgrade.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you. I'm Alex Gupta with UATV. That was Raleigh.